In the shadowed corridors of 20th century warfare, there remain stories that were never meant to reach the public record, sealed under the weight of classification stamps and buried beneath decades of political silence. World War II was not only fought with armies and machines, it was fought with deception, secrecy, and the erasure of inconvenient truths. Files marked ultra-secret and vertraulich were quietly destroyed, testimonies altered, and entire operations wiped from official histories, leaving behind only fragments, anomalies in archives, whispers in intelligence reports, or scattered notes in forgotten trial transcripts. These are not the celebrated battles of Normandy or Stalingrad. These are the absences, the gaps where reality refuses to align with the narrative taught in textbooks. The war's outcome was decided not only on battlefields, but in darkened rooms of code breakers, in railway tunnels guarded by the SS, in Soviet bunkers where officers signed reports that would never see the light of day. When one follows these fragments, intercepted Enigma transmissions, missing Luftwaffe negatives, confiscated NKVD reports, a chilling pattern emerges, that behind the grand strategies of Churchill, Roosevelt and Stalin, there existed operations so clandestine that their very erasure became part of the victory. And yet, like faint signals bleeding through static, the traces endure. A vanished convoy in Arctic waters, a regiment swallowed by mountains, an airfield that appeared only on photographs, a train that departed but never arrived. Each story remains sealed in the language of intelligence. Suppressed, redacted, denied. Tonight we unseal those hidden files. Chapter 1. The Vanishing Convoy of Murmansk. In the bleak winter of 1942, the Arctic convoys represented the most perilous lifeline of the war, braving U-boat packs, Luftwaffe squadrons, and the merciless cold. They carried critical supplies from Britain and the United States to the Soviet Union. History records convoy PQ-17 as one of the most tragic losses, with ships scattered and sunk after a disastrous order to disperse. Yet buried deep within Soviet naval archives, and mentioned only once in a decrypted British intelligence cable, is a more chilling mystery. The disappearance of an entire unrecorded convoy, absent from admiralty lists, vanished from the frozen sea without trace. Known in fragments as the Phantom Convoy, its journey between Spitsbergen and Murmansk in December 1942 was never acknowledged officially, yet evidence of its existence has surfaced like a ghost through torn fragments of reports and testimonies erased from the record. One of the earliest hints appeared in a Bletchley Park decrypt, marked Ultramost Secret, file U4427. The cable referenced German Enigma traffic, describing the sighting of a second convoy moving in parallel to PQ-17's remnants. Escorted by what was believed to be HMS Sheffield, the message mentioned orders issued under the codename Eisenfaust, Iron Fist, directing Kriegsmarine commandos to intercept. This fragment never appeared in official Admiralty summaries, and Churchill's War Cabinet minutes make no mention of a parallel convoy. But in Gestapo file No. 10342, discovered by accident in East Berlin after the fall of the wall, interrogations of British prisoners detailed their capture during a midnight boarding in Arctic waters. They described German commandos wearing SS insignia rather than standard Kriegsmarine uniforms, storming their freighters in silence and seizing cargo crates sealed with British nuclear laboratory markings. The mention of nuclear material in 1942 is alarming. According to fragments preserved in Moscow, the cargo reportedly included uranium oxide, intended for shipment under the still-secret Anglo-American Nuclear Cooperation Agreement. If true, this would predate the better-known US-UK cooperation in the Manhattan Project. Soviet reports stored in Naval Archive Box 17B, opened briefly in 1991 before being resealed, speak of crates marked tube alloys, the codename for Britain's atomic weapons research. These crates, allegedly destined for transfer to Los Alamos via Soviet intermediaries, vanished along with the convoy. The files note probable seizure by enemy forces, but no follow-up investigation, as Stalin's regime demanded. Silence rather than admitting a catastrophic intelligence breach. Equally disturbing is the silence from the Royal Navy. HMS Sheffield's logs for December 1942 were destroyed in what Admiralty records describe as accidental fire. Surviving officers later testified, under oath in closed 1946 inquiries, that the cruiser had been engaged in routine patrol. Yet contradictory reports from Arctic weather stations reference coded signals matching Sheffield's radio identifier broadcast in the sector where the Phantom Convoy allegedly disappeared. Declassified in the 1970s, one fragment recorded distress signals from merchant vessels under Allied flag, silenced at 02:17 hours. No convoy by name was acknowledged to be there. Witnesses among Norwegian resistance fighters provided another clue. In testimony preserved by the Norwegian Defence Museum, locals recalled German units unloading crates at Narvik in early 1943. Crates unusually large, stenciled in English, and guarded under orders signed by General Eduard Dietl. When pressed, German records claimed these crates contained technical equipment seized from British vessels. What became of this cargo remains unknown, though post-war Allied intelligence suggested it may have been redirected to secret research centers in Silesia, later targeted by Soviet occupation forces. The weather on the night of disappearance was brutal. Reports describe gale-force winds, blizzards reducing visibility to less than 50 meters, and Arctic seas littered with ice flows. These conditions would have cloaked any naval action in near-total darkness. Survivors of PQ-17 later testified they had seen searchlights and tracer fire on the horizon, yet no wreckage or lifeboats were ever found the next day. It was as if entire ships had been swallowed by the polar night. Maritime historians often dismiss these accounts as misinterpretations, yet the Soviet archive notes specifically list missing vessels unaccounted for, presumed sunk, no debris sighted. Such language was highly unusual for official naval records, which typically provided precise details of tonnage lost and causes of sinking. The Cold War only deepened the silence. When US and British intelligence agencies began Operation Paperclip, seeking German scientists and documents, references to the Phantom Convoy surfaced in CIA briefings coded as Project Seafarer. Reports speculated that captured uranium oxide may have been transferred into German hands, possibly feeding advanced reactor experiments in Haigerloch or the obscure Kaiser Wilhelm Institute programs. If so, this would explain certain anomalies in Allied aerial reconnaissance from 1944, noting unusual energy emissions near underground sites in southern Germany. But any connection to the Arctic seizures was quietly erased, the files sealed under classification levels, not due to expire until well into the 21st century. There remains the human question: the sailors who never returned. Families of merchant mariners in Liverpool and Glasgow reported receiving letters from the Admiralty that their relatives were lost at sea, presumed drowned in enemy action. But in at least 7 cases, records show these sailors were never assigned to known convoys, and their names appear only in erased drafts of PQ-17's rosters. Decades later, when Stasi archives were briefly opened in 1990, one document catalogued captured British prisoners of war, transferred from Norway to camps near Dresden in 1943. Among them were names matching those supposedly lost with PQ-17. No official reconciliation has ever been made. Between these lists, the Phantom Convoy remains, absent from naval histories, erased from official war memorials, and ignored in most accounts of Arctic warfare. Yet the scattered traces, Bletchley decrypts, Gestapo interrogation reports, Soviet archive notations, Norwegian testimonies, align into a disturbing narrative of a convoy erased because of what it carried, and the catastrophic implications of its capture. Its disappearance remains one of the most unsettling absences in the vast ocean of World War II records, a shadow that hints at nuclear secrets stolen under cover of Arctic blizzards and sealed away in archives marked not to be opened until 2045. In the silence of frozen seas, the unanswered question lingers. Who truly captured the Phantom Convoy, and where did its cargo vanish? Chapter 2: Operation Iron Wolf Disappearance. March 1945. The Third Reich was collapsing under relentless assault from all sides. In the west, the Americans and British were crossing the Rhine. In the east, the Red Army was tearing into Silesia and advancing toward Berlin. Amid this chaos, Heinrich Himmler authorized the activation of Werwolf, a clandestine SS guerrilla division tasked with carrying out sabotage, assassinations, and resistance behind enemy lines. While werewolf operations have since been reduced to historical footnotes, Soviet military archives and scattered Allied intelligence fragments reveal an operation so strange, so incomplete that it remains a yawning blank in the record. Codenamed Eisenwolf, Iron Wolf, the mission involved over 300 Waffen-SS operatives, dispatched to the Sudeten Mountains under the First Ukrainian Front's shadow. Within days they were gone. No corpses, no survivors, no battlefield wreckage. Entire battalions reported underground detonations, engines humming beneath the earth, and then nothing. The units simply ceased to exist. According to Soviet dispatches filed under Tsamo Archive Folder 631124, intercepted German transmissions on March 12, 1945 described a special movement through fortified mineshafts east of Breslau. These reports suggested a withdrawal of troops, perhaps even elite engineers or scientists, under orders signed by SS General Hans Kammler, the same figure later associated with secret weapons projects at Mittelwerk, where the V-2 rockets were assembled. Soviet First Ukrainian Front forces advancing into the region recorded skirmishes and abandoned weapons, but when they reached the supposed stronghold, the tunnels were eerily deserted. A field report, handwritten and signed by Colonel Ivan Bogdanov, stated, "Enemy fortifications intact, supplies stacked in readiness, but no defenders present. Hearing of subterranean machinery persists." NKVD observers attached to the regiment classified the case as redeployment, yet internal notes carried a darker annotation, possibility of concealed transfer of technological assets. The tunnels themselves became the focal point of suspicion. Czechoslovak mining records had long indicated a labyrinth of shafts in the Ore Mountains, reinforced and expanded by German engineers during the occupation. When Prague archives were briefly opened after the Velvet Revolution in 1991, documents revealed orders issued in late 1944 to concrete seal sections of mines and install electrical wiring far beyond what mining operations required. Testimonies from forced laborers, recorded during post-war trials, mentioned underground chambers filled with machinery, crates marked with Reichsadler seals, and guards under SS command. One Czech witness, Jan Novak, swore under oath that he saw rail tracks vanishing into chambers lit by flood lamps, with boxes too heavy for men to carry. When Allied prosecutors cross-examined, these statements were dismissed as exaggeration, but fragments of corroborating evidence remained in confiscated SS engineering blueprints, now missing from Nuremberg trial archives. Operation Eisenwolf's disappearance raised alarm in Allied intelligence circles as well. British SIS files, declassified in 1979, refer to intercepted German radio traffic calling the Sudeten region Wolf Chamber. The term appeared in only 2 decrypted messages, both intercepted from the SS command net, both abruptly cut off mid-transmission. SS analysts speculated that the Germans were attempting to move key scientists or experimental equipment into subterranean sanctuaries to avoid Soviet capture. American G2 intelligence officers, working alongside OSS, flagged the incident as possible evidence of continued resistance planning beyond the war's expected end. But by May 1945, with Germany in ruins, the Eisenwolf file was quietly shelved, stamped, "No further action." Soviet units that attempted to explore the tunnels reported unusual hazards. Declassified notes from a 1946 NKVD engineering survey describe collapsed galleries, sections lined with blast doors welded shut, and traces of explosive residue indicating deliberate demolition from within. Survey teams recorded unexplained electrical wiring running deep into inaccessible sections, as if powering equipment still operational beyond the collapses. The report concluded, "Evidence of intentional entombment of facilities, likely with personnel inside. Recommends sealing and classifying." Stalin's regime, wary of fueling speculation about German technological advances, ordered the matter erased from official Soviet military histories. In Cold War decades, Eisenwolf became a rumor circulated among defectors and whispered in Warsaw Pact briefings, but never acknowledged openly. Eyewitness reports add further strangeness. Red Army soldiers advancing through Silesia recalled hearing metallic grinding noises at night, resembling generators or machinery buried beneath the mountains. Some claimed to see smoke rising from ventilation shafts carved into the hillsides. A surviving diary from Sergeant Alexei Kuznetsov, preserved by his family and later donated to a Moscow museum, records, "We followed the sound of engines into the hills. The earth shook, as if trains moved underground. But when we breached the entrances, nothing, only silence and walls of stone." Such personal accounts, often dismissed as wartime exaggeration, align disturbingly with the physical evidence of reinforced shafts and heavy wiring uncovered decades later. Theories about what the SS intended in those mountains vary. Some historians believe Operation Eisenwolf was designed as a last-ditch plan to relocate nuclear research, perhaps the elusive uranium enrichment centrifuges rumored to exist in Silesia. Others suggest it was simply a desperate attempt to establish fortified redoubts for werewolf guerrillas, concealed in the rugged terrain to harass Soviet supply lines. Yet the scale of the disappearance, hundreds of armed men vanishing without trace, argues against simple dispersal. Even guerrilla units left tracks, bodies, or captured stragglers. Here, there was nothing. Entire platoons evaporated as though swallowed by the mines themselves. Post-war American interest in the region deepened suspicion. Operation Alsos, the Allied scientific intelligence mission, dispatched agents into the Sudeten Mountains in late 1945, ostensibly to investigate rumors of German nuclear experiments. The mission's reports remain partially classified, but surviving fragments reference sealed galleries consistent with weapons development facilities. General Leslie Groves, head of the Manhattan Project, personally reviewed these findings. In later testimony before a Senate committee, he denied the Germans had made significant progress toward an atomic bomb, yet his private notes, leaked decades later, reveal concern that uranium compounds may have been evacuated to inaccessible locations. Whether these compounds were linked to Eisenwolf remains unanswered. In East Germany, the Stasi maintained their own files on the missing SS division. Code-named Operation Nabel, FOG, the investigation sought to identify whether remnants of Eisenwolf had established post-war networks. In a 1957 report, informants claimed former SS officers spoke of comrades entombed in the Wolf Chamber, guardians of secrets no victor would inherit. By the 1960s, these reports had been reclassified, folded into broader Soviet disinformation operations, and buried in inaccessible vaults. When the Berlin Wall fell, fragments of the Nabel files surfaced, but most references to Eisenwolf had already been stripped from the record. To this day, no bodies from the vanished division have been conclusively identified, no mass graves uncovered. The Sudeten tunnels remain sealed, many collapsed, their entrances covered by landslides or post-war industrial expansion. Locals speak of collapsed shafts where the earth hums at night, but official geological surveys dismiss such claims as folklore. What is undeniable, however, is the gap in records. 300 men, heavily armed, ordered into a mission, erased from German, Soviet, and Allied histories alike. Their fate remains frozen in silence, a chilling reminder that even as the Reich collapsed in fire, it still possessed secrets it was determined to bury forever. Chapter 3: The Ghost Airfield of Belarus. On October 9, 1943, Luftwaffe reconnaissance aircraft conducted routine flights over the contested skies of Belarus. One sortie returned with photographs that left even hardened German analysts unsettled. South of Minsk, near a cluster of forests and marshlands, they identified a sprawling Soviet airfield. The images showed well-camouflaged runways, revetments lined with fighter aircraft, and what appeared to be heavy anti-aircraft batteries positioned around the perimeter. Dozens of Yak fighters were parked neatly in formation, their shadows stretching across the ground in the low autumn sun. The analysts marked the location as a priority target, forwarding the intelligence to Luftflotte 6 headquarters. Orders were drafted for a bombing raid, and then, within weeks, the airfield ceased to exist. When the German Fourth Army advanced into the sector later that month, they found nothing. No runways, no hangars, no destroyed aircraft. The ground showed no sign of construction, only open fields and marshy soil incapable of supporting a functional airbase. The Luftwaffe reconnaissance photographs, archived under file LW Recon 775, remained stark evidence of something that should have been there but wasn't. Senior officers, including General Feldmarschall Ernst Busch, demanded explanations, but none came. Soviet records insist no airbase ever operated in that region. The contradiction remains one of the strangest anomalies of the Eastern Front. British intelligence became aware of the case through intercepted Soviet transmissions. Declassified SIS archives include a fragment from October 11, 1943, where a station identified as Vostok ordered evacuation of Project Orion assets from a location corresponding to the alleged airfield. The phrase Project Orion has never been fully explained. Analysts in London speculated it might have referred to experimental aircraft or decoy operations, but the absence of physical evidence was never reconciled. A separate MI6 note from November 1943 remarks, "Area south of Minsk unusually devoid of aerial combat activity, inconsistent with expected enemy presence." The implication was chilling. If the Germans were tricked into seeing an airfield that never existed, then Soviet deception capabilities were far more advanced than the Allies realized. The technology required for such deception defied wartime norms. Camouflage was common, but producing the illusion of runways, buildings, and dozens of aircraft captured in aerial photography suggests techniques beyond simple paint and netting. Some researchers point to the possibility of large-scale dummies, inflatable aircraft, and staged facilities. Yet Luftwaffe experts of the period were skilled in distinguishing such decoys, and the photographs, later analyzed by Allied intelligence after the war, showed convincing shadows and depth. One OSS analyst in 1945 remarked, "If decoys, they were the most advanced ever constructed." Others proposed the possibility of optical manipulation, deliberate distortion of reconnaissance film by Soviet counterintelligence, though no evidence supports that the Germans' own cameras were tampered with. Post-war Soviet declassification in the 1990s revealed a heavily redacted memorandum from the KGB scientific division. It referenced false terrain projections tested in Belarus sector, 1943. The memo, stripped of details, was stamped with the classification "Do not translate," restricted to Directorate T. Directorate T was known during the Cold War for managing advanced technology projects, including research into psychological operations and optical warfare. The connection to a wartime ghost airfield suggests an experimental lineage stretching back into the height of the Eastern Front. The absence of combat records further compounds the mystery. German pilots tasked with air superiority over Minsk reported surprisingly little Soviet activity in the sector during October and November 1943, yet the reconnaissance photographs indicated an airbase bristling with fighters. Why did those aircraft never rise to challenge the Luftwaffe? Why were there no dogfights, no wreckage, no burned-out hangars when the Germans advanced? The silence in the combat logs is itself a clue. The planes photographed may never have existed at all. During Operation Bagration in 1944, when Soviet forces reclaimed the region, NKVD operatives filed reports mentioning disused positions once prepared for deception testing. One fragment, later unearthed by Belarusian historians, referenced large-scale canvas structures destroyed upon withdrawal. Yet this does not account for the convincing realism captured in the German photographs. Inflatable aircraft and dummy runways could deceive at ground level, but tricking aerial reconnaissance into recording shadows consistent with sunlight angles suggests a deeper manipulation of perception. The surviving photographs remain a point of contention. The originals were reportedly destroyed in the Dresden bombings of 1945, yet secondary copies surfaced in CIA archives under the codename Operation Paperclip. Analysts reviewing German intelligence captured after the war flagged the ghost airfield images as anomalies, but the subject was buried under broader concerns about nuclear research and rocket technology. When a CIA archivist in the 1960s attempted to revisit the file, he found the negatives missing. Only low-quality reproductions exist today, each grainy but still recognizable. Rows of Yak fighters, anti-aircraft batteries, camouflaged hangars, all situated on land where nothing was ever built. Local testimonies add a final, haunting layer. Villagers from the area south of Minsk recalled German patrols searching fields that had always been empty. One farmer interviewed in the 1950s said, "They asked us, 'Where is the airfield?' We laughed. There was only mud and swamp." Another spoke of soldiers digging, convinced they would uncover hidden runways. They found nothing but soil and roots. To the villagers, the idea of an airbase was absurd. To the Luftwaffe, it was photographic reality. The ghost airfield of Belarus remains unexplained, a war phantom straddling the line between deception and impossibility. If it was a decoy, it was unparalleled. If it was an illusion, it points to capabilities decades ahead of their time. And if it was something more, an experiment in manipulation of perception itself, then the implications stretch beyond World War II, into the shadowy corridors of Cold War research where Soviet and Western agencies alike explored the boundaries of psychological warfare. What is certain is this. In October 1943, the German Luftwaffe photographed an airfield that official records say never existed. Whether trick of the eye, feat of engineering, or classified experiment, the phantom base south of Minsk endures as one of the most chilling mysteries erased from the history of the war. Chapter 4: The Disappearing Train of Himmler. April 1945. Germany was burning, Berlin encircled by Soviet artillery, and the Reich fractured under the weight of its own defeat. Yet in those last chaotic weeks, a singular order was given by Heinrich Himmler, Reichsführer SS, and one of the most feared men of the regime. From the city of Weimar, a special Reichsbahn train departed under heavy SS escort. Its manifest, according to fragmentary records, listed crates designated as cultural assets, priority black. Eyewitnesses described a long armoured convoy, its wagons covered and sealed, guarded by men bearing the black uniforms of the SS Totenkopfverbände. The train was last seen moving westward toward the Harz Mountains, disappearing into the dense forests and tunnels of Thuringia. After that, no record exists. Allied forces advancing through the region never captured it. The Soviets, despite combing the Nordhausen tunnels, found nothing. The train and its contents were erased as if it had never departed. Post-war investigations by the US Counterintelligence Corps uncovered fragments pointing to the train's significance. File CIC Haas 1139, declassified in part during the 1970s, claimed the cargo included looted treasures from occupied Krakow and Prague, gold bullion seized from concentration camps, and even confidential Reichsbank reserves. Survivors of the Weimar station staff later testified they saw crates so heavy they required mechanical lifts, each marked with black Reichsadler seals and SS runes. Rumors spread among Allied interrogators that Himmler intended the train as a bargaining tool, treasures to exchange for his life in negotiations with the West. But if that was the plan, it failed. Himmler was captured by British troops in May 1945 and committed suicide within days, leaving behind no word about the train. The Harz Mountains, riddled with mines and underground facilities, became the suspected burial ground of the convoy. US Army engineers, already investigating the Mittelwerk tunnels where V-2 rockets had been assembled, reported finding sealed galleries too dangerous to excavate. One engineer's notes, preserved in the US National Archives, describe collapsed shafts, large enough to accommodate entire trains. Yet official excavation attempts were quietly abandoned. In 1946, the Soviets launched their own operation in Nordhausen, but reports from the Ministry of Internal Affairs claimed no transport convoys located. A Stasi memorandum from 1957, uncovered after the fall of East Germany, stated more bluntly, "Evidence suggests buried convoy entombed within collapsed galleries. Excavation order rescinded by Moscow directive. The reasons for halting the dig remain classified." Eyewitness accounts reinforce the mystery. Civilians in Thuringia recalled hearing explosions in the mountains in the weeks after the war's end, as if tunnels had been deliberately destroyed. Others claimed to have seen SS units guarding entrances long after the official German surrender. In 1949, a group of local farmers discovered a section of partially collapsed railway track vanishing into a hillside, hastily covered by rubble and earth. When investigators arrived, they found the tracks cut clean, as if by demolition charges. The site was sealed, and no further exploration allowed. Theories about the train's purpose vary. Some historians argue it was Himmler's last desperate attempt to hide stolen wealth from Allied seizure, perhaps intended to finance a future SS underground network. Others suggest it carried far more sensitive material. Secret archives, coded communications, or even the results of human experimentation conducted in camps such as Buchenwald, only miles from Weimar itself. A CIA report from 1962, codenamed Black Eagle, suggested the possibility that the train contained strategic intelligence dossiers concerning German and foreign nationals. Such material, if discovered, would have been of immense value during the Cold War. In Poland, whispers of the gold train persisted for decades. Survivors and resistance fighters spoke of vast treasure convoys departing the Reich's eastern territories, converging towards Silesia and Thuringia as the Red Army closed in. Archaeologists in the 2010s even attempted to locate trains rumored buried near Wałbrzych, though nothing definitive was uncovered. Yet the Himmler train remains distinct. Unlike rumor-fed legends, this convoy was actually documented in fragmentary Allied files and witnessed by railway workers. Its disappearance was not hearsay, it was fact. The Deutsche Reichsbahn's wartime records add a final layer of erasure. Standard practice required meticulous logging of departures, manifests, and arrivals. Yet in April 1945, the Weimar Registry contains an unaccountable gap. Pages covering the week of the train's departure are missing, torn from the ledger. Investigators decades later concluded the removal was deliberate. No surviving Reichsbahn officer admitted knowledge of the special transport, though several conceded under interrogation that SS units often commandeered trains without filing standard paperwork. The closing weeks of the war were chaos, but even in that chaos, the Himmler train stands out as a deliberate disappearance. It was seen leaving Weimar, it was tracked heading into Thuringia, and then it was gone. No wreckage, no treasure, no bodies, just silence in the records and whispers in the archives. The Soviet refusal to excavate further only deepened suspicion. What did Moscow fear would be uncovered? Golden art could have been paraded as trophies, but intelligence dossiers, nuclear research, or evidence of atrocities could destabilize post-war settlements. Today, the fate of Himmler's disappearing train remains one of the most enduring shadows of the Reich's final days. Whether buried under the Harz Mountains, dismantled in secret, or spirited away through still unknown means, its absence is carefully maintained in both German and Allied histories. Like the phantom convoy of Murmansk, like the vanished Eisenwolf division, it exists only in fragments, Gestapo seals, Allied file numbers, villagers' memories. It departed from Weimar. It never arrived anywhere. And in that silence, the unanswered question lingers. What was so valuable that it had to be erased, along with all who might remember it? The fragments we have explored, an Arctic convoy erased from naval charts, a regiment swallowed by mountains, an airfield that never existed, and a train that vanished into the Reich's dying days, form a tapestry of silence woven across the Second World War. Each case is marked by missing files, redacted testimonies, and archives sealed for decades, if not centuries. They are not the familiar tales of Normandy, Kursk, or Iwo Jima. They are anomalies, absences carefully excised from official history, leaving behind only shadows in reports and whispers in intelligence briefings. Their common thread is erasure, a deliberate removal of facts too dangerous, too compromising, or too destabilizing to survive in public record. The questions remain unresolved. Who ordered the disappearance of the Phantom Convoy, and where did its atomic cargo go? What machinery rumbled beneath the Sudeten tunnels, and why were 300 men never seen again? How could reconnaissance photographs capture an airfield that locals swore was only marshland? And what truly lay in Himmler's train, sealed under mountains, denied to both victors of the war? These mysteries are not merely curiosities of the past. They hint at deeper truths, that the war was fought as much in shadows as in fire, and that victory often required burying secrets alongside the dead. As declassification deadlines approach in the coming decades, new fragments may surface, but history suggests many will never emerge. Too much was destroyed, too much deliberately concealed. The silence itself becomes part of the narrative, a warning that some truths are considered too dangerous for daylight. Until those vaults are opened, until those tunnels are dug, these chilling absences will continue to haunt the memory of a war already steeped in blood and secrecy. And perhaps that is the most unsettling truth of all, that the greatest secrets of the Second World War are not what we know, but what was made to disappear.